a retired homicide detective. I've interviewed thousands of people, from serial killers to ministers. Welcome to the interview room. Everyone on this wonderful Sunday evening, welcome to the interview room. My name is Chris McDonough. I am so excited for tonight's program with my dear friend, Dr. Gary Brucato. If you're not familiar with him, I've got his bio memorized. He has not only been a visiting scholar at Boston College, he is the author of the largest mass murder database in the world with over 119 years, I believe, of research. And he is an expert on what we are going to talk about tonight. I could have thought of nobody else to invite here than Dr. Brucato. So I want to thank everybody, all of our subs, our Patreon members, and of course, a big thank you to our mods, Miss Sophia, Mimi J2, Maui Girl, Tree Sam, and Laura. Thank you, ladies, for all that you do. We are so grateful for you and for always looking out for our channel. I'm here to tell everybody that I've got the best mods. We are a great team here on YouTube, and we work really hard to keep the chat a very safe place for you, while simultaneously giving you an opportunity, to talk, because words matter. And tonight we're hoping that we're going to be able to lower the temperature with reason and rational conversation. This is not about politics tonight. This is about the mindset of an assassin. And unfortunately, the elephant in the living room tonight is an attempted murder on a former U.S. president and the death of two bystanders, and the death of a bystander whose name is Corey Compertoro, and two others who are clinging to life currently. This is a safe place and for people to express their opinions. But please respect one another. It's okay to have an opinion, but please don't tear each other down. Continue to have respect one for another. We may have differences, but that doesn't mean we cannot have a really good conversation about this. And so together tonight we're Americans, we're friends, and let's try to learn something from each other. And of course, with Dr. Brucato here, just remember that words do matter. They're very powerful. And we are so grateful that, and I know from all sides of the political spectrum, we're grateful that nobody died. And that is one of the things we're going to talk about tonight. Actually, it's the main thing we're going to talk about is the mindset of an assassin. And there's all kinds of assassins out there, and that's why I've got Gary here, Dr. Brucato, to talk about it. And if you have not bought his book yet, The New Evil, you need to get over to Amazon. You need to buy the book. It's with Dr. Michael Stone, who's passed away, and of course, Dr. Brucato. and it's understanding the emergence of modern violent crime. And this crime, because that's what it is, that just took place in Pennsylvania, there's a problem in River City, and we're going to talk about that tonight. So, Gary, I know that there's so much that we can go into, and you've been writing about this topic for years, and I know that you also have some research and some study coming out.
Yeah.
But yesterday's event, unfortunately, was not new in the world. So, but it hasn't happened in a very long time, at least not in the United States. So, so help us approach this evening from a forensic angle, so that we can learn together this evening.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me on, and thank you to the audience for never seeming to have their fill of my appearances on your show. So I always appreciate that. First of all, I think it's very important that we pause a moment and say that irrespective of a person's political beliefs, no matter how angry a person may feel about any political figure, there is no place for this kind of violence in that discourse. That has to be condemned outright, and I think we have to really dedicate everything we're saying, as I like to do, to the victims. In this situation, there are two people clinging to life. There is a person who is dead. There is a former American president who was injured. There is the perpetrator whose degree of mental health is unclear, who is now dead. This is a tragedy all around. And the other thing I think we have to bear in mind is that this was nearly a mass murder. If two more people had died, we would be dealing with a mass murder, and that makes this different than a lot of the other assassination attempts or completed assassinations of major political figures in U.S. history, because of the idea that it wasn't just the targeting of one specific person. In the Lincoln assassination, there was a whole plot to eliminate a whole slew of political figures, which would have been closer to a mass murder. But it would have been a mass murder, a mass casualty incident. But it's interesting to think about that from the get-go, right? So first of all, it's different for that reason. And we're also thinking, you have to remember, we're talking about political assassins. We're not, for example, talking about the personality of the person who killed John Lennon. We're talking about people who assassinate for political reasons. Now, I will tell you, and I think the audience will find this really very interesting, that is it okay, Chris, if I describe the subtypes of assassins?
Absolutely. But before you do that, let's to your point, Gary, let's talk about just real fast.
Yeah.
The Corey.
Who he was.
Yeah, I hope I'm not tearing up his last name. Compertoro. He was a 50-year-old former firefighter, and he's being hailed as a hero who shielded his wife and his girls from the flying bullets in Pennsylvania. And what's amazing about this is they were there, and his daughter has put just a heartwarming letter to America on Facebook, on her page. It is just, it's a tearjerker. So I'll give everybody a heads up.
I haven't seen that, so I have to take a look.
Yes, and then the two other injuries are a 57-year-old gentleman by the name of David Dutch, and he is a commandant in the Marine Corps League of Pennsylvania. So he's a former Marine, and he underwent 2 surgeries after being shot, both in the chest and in the liver, and currently is in critical condition, according to the news reports. And then the next is James Copenhaver, 74, also shot He's in stable condition, according to media reports. Both men are in the hospital still, and they are hopefully receiving some of the best medical care in the world. So let's everybody keep them, our fellow Americans, in our prayers, and see if we can offer up, some strength from the Lord to lift them. And but Corey, the gentleman who died, his wife and daughters witnessed the entire thing. So our sincere condolences and prayers go out to Corey's family this evening on behalf of everybody in this chat, as well as Dr. Brucato. Okay, so let's talk about the 4 subtypes of individuals that we're talking about. And also, I where do you think this guy, the elephant in the living room tonight, the shooter in this situation, this Thomas Matthew Crooks, he's 20 years old, from Bethel Park, Pennsylvania. Does he fit anywhere in your psychology here in relationship to your book? Let's start there, because many folks have your book.
Well, I think that what's complicated about it is that the scale that Michael and I discuss is about personal cause offenders. And when you're dealing with assassins, as we'll see, they generally see themselves as politically motivated, so that they don't, it's more like asking a person in an army why they kill. Now, of course, as what we're going to discuss is that the true motives of such people are actually very varied, but they would see themselves, particularly one of the subtypes we'll talk about, as more politically motivated and therefore not doing this for themselves. And if that is the case, the person wouldn't be ranked on the scale. But if the person is motivated in any of the other ways that we're going to talk about, they would be all over the map in the scale. I think the best thing for me to do is first talk about the subtypes and then answer the question about, because there's going to be too many different types. And incidentally, it was in 1865, exactly, if my math is correct, 160 years and 3 months ago today, that Lincoln was assassinated, because he was killed on April 14th, 1865. And what's interesting about it is that it really brought the country together. It was an act that was intended to sort of avenge the South and all of that after the, at the tail end of the war. But the reality is that it had a way of causing people to step back and say, what are we doing? What are we doing here? It had a unifying effect. And I do hope and pray that this fortunately unsuccessful attempt on a former president will cause some people to have pause and think about turning the heat down, and think about the fact that we're all brothers and sisters here in this country. And it is okay to disagree. I heard the very great historian Shelby Foote, the Civil War historian, famously said that what went wrong in the country at the time of the Civil War, the American Civil War, was simply that we lost our great American ability to compromise. And I think that's very true. There's nothing more American than two people butting heads and having to meet in the middle, but we're losing the ability to do that.
And I love that series that Ken Burns did. And he's all over that series. Yeah. So I love that quote that you just gave.
Yeah. And he's right. He's 100% right. And now, so let me talk a little bit about that. And I will say that these types that I'm going to talk about were proposed by an expert named James Clark. And both Michael Stone and I were very fond of the system that he put together to break down the subtypes of assassins, and particularly American political assassins. And in his study, which included everyone from 1835, when Richard Lawrence tried unsuccessfully to kill Andrew Jackson, but had a gun lock up on him, all the way until 1981, with the assassination attempt on Reagan. It covered all of those. And now we have this new incident, right? And in that series that went from 1835 to 1981, I think he had 16 instances of where someone attempted, successfully or unsuccessfully, to kill either a president or a very high-ranking political figure. And there are other cases where people tried to kill members of Congress or did kill members of Congress. For example, a lot of people in the audience may not realize that one of the many awful deeds by Jeffrey Jones, the cult leader, was the killing of a member of Congress, a sitting, if I remember, a sitting member of Congress. But people don't realize that, right? And then, of course, there was the Jared Loughner incident where he attacked a politician. But we're talking about high-ranking, like president, vice president, and so forth. And so these are the 4 subtypes in a nutshell. So the first category is an individual who really believes that he, and they are all he's with 2 exceptions, for example, Squeaky Fromme, female, they believe that they are called in some way that is higher than themselves for a political reason to eliminate a political figure that they believe represents a kind of evil. And that individual is not psychotic. They are fully aware of what they are doing. They go into it fully prepared to be killed in the act. The only emotion that they really show in terms of being out of control emotionally is that they're so zealous about what it is that they believe that it overrides their desire their need to self-protect. They see themselves like they're going into a war, and if I have to die for the cause, I'll die for the cause. And these people are very well planned. They do not do this impulsively. You sometimes find that they've been plotting it for months. Sometimes they'll involve other people in a little army. And they don't recant. These people, when they are in court, for example, if they survive, they will say, I'm proud of it. It had to be done. I would do it again if I could, etc. Now, that first category contains a lot of very interesting people. And one of the people that it contains, according to Clark, is John Wilkes Booth. Because John Wilkes Booth's motive, superficially, was that he wanted in this glorious way to avenge the South after the Civil War, at the tail end of the Civil War. I am going to argue that he actually belongs in a different category, but theoretically he was a very rational, although hard-drinking guy who was motivated by this desire for revenge and eliminating a man that he thought was evil. Now, in the second category, and this is where I think Booth really goes, is an egocentric, lonely, socially not particularly fully appreciated person who is not a psychopath, but who tends to blame everybody around them for their shortcomings. And that kind of person that one might describe as narcissistic thinks that by tying themselves to the killing of a famous person, that they are going to be bound together forever in history, and they're going to vicariously take their fame. So if we look at non-political assassins like Chapman, killing John Lennon, you cannot look up John Lennon without seeing the name of his assassin. Right. Or if we look at Andrew Cunanan killing Versace, he didn't care who he killed. He originally wanted to kill other people. Madonna, for example, was someone on the hit list. The idea was to kill a famous person and tie yourself together forever in history. And I think that is a little more where Booth belongs. And I disagree with Clark because, and I'll tell you, because I think people find it interesting, is that Booth was a member of one of the most famous acting families in U.S. history. His father was a great, great Shakespearean stage actor, Junius Brutus Booth. And his brother was Edwin Booth, who some argued was the greatest actor of that whole generation. And John Wilkes Booth, while popular, was something of a ham who wasn't quite as good as the others. And there was this idea, I think, that he got kind of over-identified with the Shakespearean character of Brutus killing Julius Caesar. And in this way, he started to conceptualize himself as the person who was going to take out the American, the American Caesar figure, basically. That he was going to be the American Brutus. In fact, the best book ever written about John Wilkes Booth is called American Brutus for that reason. And there was this vain, egocentric need, I think, for attention and to be better than his dad and his brother that I think really played out. In fact, I think on some deep psychoanalytic level, the killing of the father of the country was a way of playing out the desire to knock his own dad out of the way and be the center of attention. But so I think he's more in category 2, but people say he's in category 1 because he thought he was leveling the playing field politically. So you want to think of these deeply pathetic kinds of people who are compensating for feelings of smallness and so forth. Lee Harvey Oswald falls into the second category also. What's interesting is that you have to remember that the people in category 2 have feelings. They care if you bully them, right? They're not psychopaths. They're in pain if people mock them or whatever. And so you want to bear that in mind. That's going to come up in the discussion about what may have been going on with the attempted assassination of Trump.
Well, right there, that's a good segue real fast.
Okay.
I want to just play a quick clip.
Oh, about the yeah.
Of what his friend said.
Yeah, that's a good
one. To the news. So hold your thought real fast.
Yeah, then we'll go to category 3 and 4.
Yeah, we stay in category 2. So here's a quick clip of what his friend said to the news.
Have any interaction with the shooter?
I didn't have any interaction with him, but he was like a kid that was always alone. He was always bullied every day. He was just an outcast. Yeah.
Is it surprising to hear? Would you ever suspect to think of somebody like that being someone
in Bethel Park? No. It's not something you even want to think about, like being real, and seeing all this is like actually unbelievable.
Okay, so we have his peer group saying and he goes on a little bit further, and we'll get into that, but that ties into what you were just saying about category 2.
Yes, and there are going to be pieces of information that are needed to clarify what was going on here, but the clues are beginning to suggest something a little more akin to category 2 than to category 1, because it is difficult to imagine that part of this was not a desire to elevate oneself from someone being picked on, ridiculed, outcasted, and so forth, and then kind of going out in a blaze. In fact, a lot of these people in category 2 wind up committing suicide or being killed as a part of the process, where that's almost the goal, to go out in a blaze. And they look an awful lot like your average mass shooter, which is exactly what I think this was supposed to be. This was a missed attempted mass shooting, which happened to involve a political figure.
Interesting.
And in that sense, I think we have to think of this as somebody who was compensating for, emoting anger, paranoia, so forth, at a personality level. But we don't know yet if there was psychosis or anything like that. We're going to have to find that out before we get to officially say it's category 2, but it sounds like category 2. So the motivation is like we'd see in a mass shooting. And category 3, which is the most chilling, are purely psychopathic people who are not hurt by other people. They don't care at all about other people. Their motivation for committing an assassination is a kind of nihilistic, anarchistic boredom. You have to think almost of like a character like the Joker, like in that depiction by Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight, where you're committing these outrageous acts out of a kind of boredom and wanting to just see human nature and how catastrophic it gets and stirring up cruelty, right? And I think it's difficult to think of a example of one of those. I think the guy who tried to kill FDR, Zazada, he was like that. I have quotes from him that are outrageous. I mean, they would say to him, what was your motivation? Why did you do this? He'd say, I believe in nothing, like that. It was a kind of nihilistic emptiness. And person just gets a kick out of stirring the trouble out in the world. And that's the only thing that makes them feel not numb. They find life intolerably meaningless in a kind of Dostoevsky-like kind of way. And they want to ruin it for everybody else, essentially. And what better way to do that than to eliminate a leader? And they don't really see themselves incidentally as political, that type of person. They just see the leader as just another person to eliminate, to create chaos. And then finally, the fourth type is a deeply psychiatrically disturbed person who is psychotic, who is not operating in the realm of reality, whether it's because of drugs or alcohol or loss of contact with reality completely through some kind of delusion. And that's the kind of person that's likely to tell you, you know, God told me to go out and kill this person. A voice told me to kill this person. That's where they thought that Richard Lawrence, the attempted assassin of Jackson, fell. I think that's where Guiteau, the killer of Garfield, fell. At first, they painted it differently, but if you read everything that was put out about him afterward, it's pretty clear that he was deeply, deeply disturbed psychiatrically. You want to understand that that type of assassin is actually quite rare. People with serious mental illness don't usually commit violence. They usually are the victims of violence. That notion that people with psychosis go out and kill people is quite rare. Actually, the literature says that it's if you're not using your meds or if you are using drugs or alcohol, you're far more likely to be aggressive, and it's usually because you're hearing voices that are commanding you, or you have a very particular type of delusion that you're being persecuted. So from that perspective, it's kind of like the person thinks they're just defending themselves. Like if you or I thought that our neighbors were trying to kill us, we might get a weapon because we think it's self-defense, right? But it's delusional in its basis. And but it's really actually quite rare. And in my own work with Rocky Gurgis, Dr. Rocky Gurgis at Columbia, we were the people who found, which is now, I think, an important point in the literature, I'm proud to say, that in the prodromal phase and that sort of sub-threshold phase of psychosis before you have your first episode, it's actually very common. About a third of those people have these intrusive, violent images that come into their mind, but they don't do anything about it until the eruption into the first episode. And it's that window, that like few days or weeks before you're treated for psychosis, that one is actually dangerous. It's in that little patch when the person says, aha, now I get it all. I've got to go out and, you know, hurt this person because now it all makes sense. And that is the moment where you worry the most. After that, it's mostly because someone isn't taking meds or is using drugs or alcohol. Usually those psychotic people are fairly harmless. So what I'm trying to say here is that they're among the people who try or commit political assassinations. You've got these four subtypes. And the clues about this particular guy that tried to assault Trump, I mean, we can walk through this, but it does seem category 1 is probably going to be ruled out because there were targets other than the particular political figure. So already we start thinking that the feelings of the person go beyond some person that represents, unless they saw the other people in the audience as part of some kind of army or group politically. But I think that's the first thing you want to remember is the rage or the upset is more universal than that. I think the person just was trying to give it the panache of being about a cause so that it didn't just look like I'm upset and I'm killing people because I'm, you know, rejected. So there is that. Category 2.
And they found explosives.
And explosives, yeah. Yes, very
which would indicate maybe a bigger plot here.
Well, I think the idea was to take out as many people as possible, of course.
Yeah, to your point.
So category 2 sounds very likely. Category 3 is improbable, and the reason is this person clearly had feelings. He was hurt. So the people in category 3 couldn't care less what you think of them. They would do this simply because it's fun. And I think the evidence argues against that. We could take that one probably off the table. And the fourth of the person being just completely acutely psychotic and doing this because of voices or whatever, that we'll find out. So I think we're somewhere between serious mental illness that hasn't yet been identified, but the probability points to, and everything I know about the motives for these offenders points us to category 2. If I had to make a bet, now it is possible we're going to find out there was serious unmitigated mental illness. So you want to think about category 2, and if that's the case, that's a deeply sad kind of story here, right? Because you've got all the classic elements of the person that builds towards a mass shooting event. And you see, Chris, how you and I always talk on this show about the power of kindness and what happens when you alienate a person, and how the person can start to feel, and how they can gravitate towards a school of thought or a movement that gives shape and scope to their hatred or their desire to level the playing field or to be special again. And then you wind up with one of these category 2 type kind of offenders. Now, I wonder what your thoughts are, Chris, on what was feeding this for this kid based on the clues we have.
Well, you always want to worry about a couple of things, post incident, right?
Yeah.
Where in today's world, it gets hold of this gigantic, massive, conspiracy of, let's take out anybody or anything. And I think the evidence right now is showing that he had bigger plans, to your point. And in this category 2, it's you have to ask yourself, okay, then we need to do a victimology on him and really dig into his school, dig into his peers. There is a commercial with him, and I know it's going to hit the airwaves, but I'm going to beat everybody to it. And I'm going to show it here in 30 seconds where, believe it or not, it's from BlackRock. Okay. And everybody's going to tie him into that piece of the puzzle. Okay. And what I'm going to ask everybody to do tonight is be aware of this. If it has anything to do with anything, we don't know. Okay. But he's in it, and I'm going to play it real fast.
Hello. I teach AP and Honors Economics in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. DeLalo. Okay. I teach AP and
That's the young man right there. Okay. Now, because this company is named, the conspiracies are going to start, around the world, I'm sure.
Honors Economics in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Financial well-being to me is knowing that I can be free to do the things that I love to do. I hope when I retire someday, they say, that guy made this place a special place to come to school and gave as much as he could to help the community.
So he's seen a couple of times in this commercial. Now, on the other side of that coin, we have your friends.
Did he do anything?
Where did Gary go? I think he accidentally hit a button. So let's see where he went. There he is. You accidentally hit a button. So okay, that said, but now we go into the victimology of, okay, that's kind of as an investigator, right? From an investigator position, we see this other stuff out there. Okay, what was he into? Well, he had an opportunity to participate in a commercial, yada, yada. Okay, great, fine. It was about investment, engineering, the teacher. The focus was on the teacher, but because he's in it, now it's going to spin around him. But then we go to his peer group, and his peer group says to the public, he sat by himself at lunch. He was bullied every single day. Okay. It kind of reminded me of, do you think this kid could have been a school shooter at some point, a massive? Would he have fit into that? Does category 2 fit into the school shooting scenario? And this political event kind of just happens to be there, and he is, taking that as his opportunity to strike. What's your thought?
Well, let me put it this way: the second category, which Clark came up with for political assassins or would-be assassins, hits on all the same points that my own work and the work of other people has demonstrated come up in the lives of the average mass shooter. And the idea seems to be that it just depends on the target. If the person targets a political figure, they would go over into this non-personal cause thing, supposedly. But I think this was either a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B, where it was partially political and partially for his own needs, sort of like we saw in John Wilkes Booth, or it was just category 2. It was just a kind of, sad soul that was having a hard time with other people. And as I said, that immediately eliminates an empty psychopath who doesn't care. This is a hurt person. Now, that first image that comes on the screen, can you put it up again with the blackboard or the squeegee board, whatever that thing is called?
Oh,
board. Yeah, where they're writing on the board. Yeah,
the teacher.
I want to, just show that image again. There's a reason to mention it.
My name is Brian DeLallo. I teach AP and honors.
Yeah, now, you see, the first thing that jumps out at me looking at that picture is, now, unless he's just a really good actor, this kid looks interested. And that already starts to tell you this is not a psychopath who's interested in nothing of the category 3 type. This is somebody who thinks he's going to have a future and is learning and taking this in and is interested in what this authority figure that he finds interesting has to say. And you already get the feeling that there's a person who could relate to some human beings if they were good to him. So then you have to wonder, well, then what about the people who weren't? Did their voices just wash out the other people? Now, I have said many, many times when discussing my work on mass shooters, and that, let's face it, this was a mass shooting incident. I have said, it just wasn't a mass murder, but it was an attempted one. But I've said many times in discussing them that the key to that type of person is as follows. They lack a sense of identity and purpose. And they think if they could just find something that they're good at or somewhere where they belong, people will stop making fun of them. They will be accepted. They will know who they are, and they will just do that thing. And they got that one person or thing that's good or that loves them. They got into a PhD program. They are going to win. They have a certain political movement they're drawn to. They have a significant other who loves them. They have a child. They work for the post office and are really good at what they do. These are all things I've heard a million times in mass shooting incidents. And then they lose it. And now they have no idea how to hang on to life and happiness and feeling good about themselves. So you have to picture, whenever I hear about this kind of thing, I think, what did this person lose? What made them become so angry and so upset and so lost that they had to go out and take it from other people? What did they think they were going to lose, or what did they lose? And you get the feeling that for this person, I don't know yet, because but my sense is, if he is anything like all the other people that I've studied, or most of them, we are going to find out that there was something that he thought he was going to lose or that he lost that was giving him a sense of purpose and identity, and he felt there was no point anymore to be here and went out in a blaze in an attempt to compensate for that thing. And that's what we're going to have to find out. And it's probably going to be something like, there's a cause I stand for, and, politically that cause is getting trampled underfoot. No one loves me. There was one person who cared about me and that person died or left me, or they want to throw me out of school, something like that. And we see that in virtually all mass murders. Remember, Chris, when we talked about Kohberger, the suspect, Kohberger in the Idaho murders, we said that you have to look for that event that triggered it. And then we found out, when Kohberger was the suspect, we found out that the triggering event seemed to be that he had that TA position, which was giving him a sense of power and control, and he was going to lose it. Well, that to me jumps out as being very critical for the timing of the event. If you've got a person sitting around fantasizing about leveling the playing field, and they're angry, and there's something holding them together, somebody loves them, something glues them together, and now they lose it, they go out and they snap. They said, that's it. It's D-Day. It's time to go out and do this. And we don't know what that precipitant was. The only other possibility is that the person had a psychotic episode and became convinced of something. We don't know what it is, or he was using drugs, lost touch with reality. But chances are it was a dynamic thing like that. And if that's true, this is a deeply pathetic story, Chris, because that would imply that this is a person who is groping for identity and belonging. And, I don't know why they didn't get that. Are you picking up on that too?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and in this picture here, you see him, to your point, one, he's selected for the commercial. Hey,
Yeah.
Why is that happening? Right. And two, he does look engaged there, or is he acting? Either way, he's in the commercial. And, this is only one shot of him in the commercial. And then, Kristen, yesterday I said he was a trained sniper. Yeah. And what we're hearing is that he was also a member of the rifle club in high school. And you're going to hear that here in a minute too, because I have a clip that, whenever I say something, I like to bring the receipts so that, I don't have to cash in a credit card at some point. But let me finish out this commercial real fast.
But Chris, let me just say very fast before the point gets lost that one of the things you're raising that's really important is that for some of these people, there's something that they like, shooting or using a weapon happens to be something that they do get praised for. And so that becomes the mechanism of communicating, like, I'm not as useless or invisible or horrible as you thought, and I'll show all of you, that kind of thing. So a lot of times we see in these offenders that if, like, for example, they had a parent who said, "Boy, are you good at hunting?" You saw that in the serial killer Robert Hansen, whose father thought the only thing his son was good at was hunting. So he hunted women and to feel manly. So you want to think about that too. And wasn't it his father's gun?
Yes, it was his father's. I think it's an AR. They're saying. We don't know for sure. They're saying it's an AR, and and I've got a couple other clips here about this. Let me finish the commercial here. So this is a BlackRock investment video that the shooter, Thomas Crooks, that's him sitting right there at the table. He's in this commercial for this company.
Economics in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
That's his high school.
Financial well-being to me is knowing that I can be free to do the things that I love to do. I hope when I retire someday, they say, that guy made this place a special place to come to
That's him.
school and gave as much as he could to help the community.
Looks like a very kind man, Chris. He looks like a very kind man.
Yeah, the instructor for sure. Let me back up what his friend said.
Part of any club or anything that you guys?
I want everybody to hear this one more time, because this is really the mindset of the friends, and they're describing his friends.
Every day, he was just an outcast, like a kid that was always alone. He was always bullied. Every day, he was just an outcast. Yeah.
When I say friends, he knows them. These two know him, even though he was a year difference in high school. He also had friends who he's got pictures of with the shooter on his phone. So that's what I mean by friends.
Is it surprising to hear? Would you ever suspect to think of somebody like that being someone
in Bethel Park? No. It's not something you even want to think about, like being real. And seeing all this is like actually unbelievable. It's so crazy.
Did he do anything in school? Was he part of any club or anything that you guys know of?
I believe he was on the rifle team.
There you go. He believes he's on the rifle team. It's his friend that tells him, yeah, we were on the rifle team together. I don't know if that's been confirmed, but he was showing interest on the rifle team at the high school.
My brother was on the rifle team. I actually texted my brother this morning to see if this is true. I've yet to heard back from him. But I did learn that out today.
Did you know anything about, or did anybody know that he had guns at home? Or
No, not that I know of.
Did you know his family at all, or not really?
I did not know his
You don't live in
family,
the
no.
neighborhood or anything. You're just
No.
you're just from the same high school.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, what's interesting about this is, these guys, they probably don't have a whole bunch of information about the shooter, but the information that they do have is enough for us to kind of get a window into, where this guy was at. And are you still leaning 100% on 2? Because, Melissa's saying he was kicked off the rifle club. I've read a bunch of articles that say that as well.
There's your answer. There's the thing that might have given him a sense of identity that, when taken from him, felt like his identity. The one thing that gave him a sense of himself was being lost. And I'm telling you from my work over and over again, that is the first question you ask. As soon as I heard about this incident, I turned to the person I was with and I said, I wonder what he lost.
Interesting.
And if that story turns out to be true, it would jive completely with everything. And think about it. It probably was something that made him feel powerful and good.
And both of his parents are social workers.
Oh, that's interesting too.
Okay. And I knew you would like that. And that's why I held it off till I told you. till I told you. He, according to everybody that's being interviewed, is he didn't fit well with others.
Yeah.
And was described as quiet. But he did graduate high school in 2022, and I have that graduation video that I'm going to show you here in a minute. When he gets his high school diploma, he looks, like he's, A-okay, things to do, no problem, life to live. So also, he worked as a dietary aide at a skilled nursing rehab center, less than a mile from his parents' house.
See, he has some empathy, Chris.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was going to say, what's that telling you?
Yeah. Not
Say
a
it
psychopath.
again. He has empathy.
Yeah, he has empathy. And the other clue that we're not dealing with category 1 is that you heard the boys saying something along the lines of, that he was kind of strange, that people picked on him, and, he was an outcast, picked on all the time. And people in category 1, by Clark's own definition, melt completely into the background. They are the last person you would expect. Thanks. I can't. But
Magnolia, you just made my night. I can't get enough of this. This is beautiful.
And incidentally, I have a soft spot for.
See, that's okay.
Daffy. I have a soft spot for Daffy Duck. Out of all those characters, if I had to pick one of those Mel Blanc characters, I like Daffy Duck. I think he's hilarious. When he loses his temper and flips out, he's hysterical. But anyway, but Tweety, you like Tweety Bird? He's
you know
cute.
what? If I'm Tweety, I'll take it. I saw a little peanut walk by me today, and I was sitting in the pew at church, and I did the Donald Duck thing.
Yeah.
She turned and she looked. She was like 4. She's lit up.
Oh, I love Donald Duck too.
Yeah.
But Daffy Duck is like. But Chris, in all seriousness, I mean, not in all seriousness, in this moment of levity, I will say that I always found Tweety Bird to be pretty sadistic. Tweety was not a very nice bird. If he could hurt that Sylvester, he would, drop him, slam things on his head, kill him. He wasn't a very nice bird at all. But I found myself rooting for the cat. But anyway, so but getting back to this very serious subject, I really do think, Chris, that he had empathy. There are clues that he had empathy, that he could connect to some people. And he didn't have the quality of melting into the background like you see in category 1. So I think already 1 and 3 are out. By process of elimination, we're left with category 2 as the most likely situation, or category 4 only if we find out that he was like completely psychotic or something. But he was participating in a rifling group. Now, is it possible that mental health reasons were why he got kicked off? Is it possible that he was getting aggressive with people? Is it possible that they became scared? We don't know. It's all speculation. But that's what we're going to have to find out. That's the only other possibility, is that this is mental health related, and people ask them to get off of the team for that reason. Now, I will tell you, this idea about the parents being social workers, if that's true, I have seen some situations where the parents are so accepting of a child. I think to a certain extent this happened with Koberger, if he's guilty. They're so accepting that when the person goes out into the world and the world doesn't love them as unconditionally as the parents did and the rest of the family did, they suddenly have a rude awakening that they're weird. It's like, like when a member of the Addams family leaves the house and people find them weird, but in the house they're not weird. They belong, right? So that as soon as they step out, it's like, whoa, that's a weird person. And then so I think you want to also think about the possibility that there was a mismatch between acceptance that might have been going on internally and a lack of acceptance out. That's one possibility. The other possibility, of course, is finding out that the person had an awful home life, but there's no clue of anything like that here. This just sounds like an awful outside the house life. So now the question, of course, is why have to go out in such a blaze of glory to try to take out one of the most powerful people in the world? Why? That's
and there. One of the questions that also came up a second ago is, where are you seeing the empathy, and how does that play into to dovetail into your thought process right now about why
the empathy and the choice of work that he had? You can tell that you wouldn't gravitate towards that kind of work if you weren't empathic. If psychopaths work in healthcare, they do things like purposely poison the patients. They're like angels of death, things like that. They're sadistic with the healthcare kind of work, and is more associated with somebody who has a capacity to care about, or at the very least has an extremely high need for structure and a constantly unchanged, constantly the same kind of rote life to hold, to bind them. But usually that kind of work requires some kind of empathy. Think of Hannibal Lecter being a psychiatrist, right? He had to at least fake empathy, to get by, right? And but or at least fake compassion. So I think there are clues of that, but the clues suggest to me a heartbroken, lonely, angry person. And then the question is, why do you have to go so grandiose? Why so big, right? Why do you have to try to eliminate? And the other thing that's very weird, Chris, is that if this was politically motivated, the political affiliation of the attempted assassin makes no sense, right? That's the thing; it doesn't make sense. This is a registered member of the same party, and they're trying to kill the head of that party. It doesn't make any sense. So I think that it has to have something.
He has a combo plate there. Yeah,
well, that's true. With the gun thing, you mean?
With the gun thing, and then with also, he donates to both sides of the coin. His dad does too, and which is kind of a mixed dichotomy, right? I mean, right now we don't have enough information.
Not that extreme, in other words, we
don't have enough data right now. Right. But what I'm curious about, what your thoughts are on why would he? I mean, if he's got all these bombs in his car potentially, I mean, why not just drive it right into the crowd and press the button, for lack of a better term, in terms of get out, start throwing stuff, or whatever the capability of the bombs are.
Because bombs are sloppy. I think he wanted a very specific target. I mean, I think that was just like, for gravy, on top of what he wanted. It's sort of like Columbine, right?
Do you think it'd be a secondary for the cops, maybe?
Yeah, it's like a secondary thing. But I think the first thing was they had a very specific target in mind. And when we think about those category 2 types of assassins, the key to the whole thing is my life will suddenly have a meaning, a purpose. You will all see what I am. And like, let's say he had succeeded, God forbid, in this killing this political figure. What would happen is every time you looked up this person who has millions and millions of people that are reading about him every single day, talking about him every single day, the story would end with the name of this man. That's the whole thing. That just parasitically coming in and taking that person's life or trying to, you now are linked together for all eternity. And that's what you want to understand is that the need for grandiosity, the need for that really supreme degree of fame, infamy, whatever, is in direct proportion to how horribly low he felt. So you have to imagine like this guy down in like, the nadir of the emotional depths, right?
Yeah, and
Out of
here's
the depths I cry
here's
unto thee.
Lucy, and I agree with her. I read this as well. That I think he was just trying to figure out, who, what,
Yeah,
when,
no
where,
identity.
and that category too, that void
Not
within
having clear identity, you mean? Lacking
yes,
identity. Yeah.
lacking identity, not knowing. Okay, I hate this. I hate this. I hate this, and
Right.
that gets transferred into this horrific shooting.
Yeah, I think that's a clever point because one of the things that Clark said I think it was rather brilliant to point it out was in analyzing all these cases of assassins that fall into this category is that they are political only in the sense that they are externalizing negative feelings they have about themselves onto a group, and that group is not really that specific. It's the idea that they just need their hatred to have a scope, and they'll move to different groups. It's just a matter of like that's who right now is bearing the brunt of my sense of inadequacy. But I think talking it through like this, unless we find out that there was some serious detachment from reality that occurred, I think it's pretty clear that this is a person who had the personality structure of a pretty, I hate to say, garden variety mass shooter. Went in there with the intention of, in a plotted way, after some kind of precipitating event that was the last straw, went in there with the idea that he was going to go out in a blaze, probably knew that he was going to be killed. It was a kind of a suicide with everybody else, not getting what I can't have, that kind of thing. And
Well, and I think that the crime scene may support what you're saying because you hear the first round, and I'll play it here,
It's
and
awful.
you see, the ear, and he goes down, but then you hear that rapid fire, bump, 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 almost like he wants to just hit anything,
Annihilate everything. Right.
that's
Exactly.
out there, and he actually does. He hits, these two. He kills one, and he's got two more, in the hospital, struggling to maintain life. So it's kind of like, okay, I got the big one now. I'm just going to keep shooting and shooting whatever's out there.
That's right. And that's where you start to realize that people in this category are really ultimately operating out of a kind of envy. That's the whole thing. It's an envy that they aren't loved just for existing the way some other people are. And they just it just it's extremely upsetting to this kind of person. There's a story that I have told in a few places. I'm not sure if I ever told it on the interview room, but I think it's very important to make you understand the psychology of this kind of person. And I'm going to slightly change this because I want to protect the identity of the person who told me the story, but the gist will be there. And I talk to people who have done some of the most outrageous things in the entire world to themselves and other people, or want to do them. And I had to talk once to somebody who jumped in front of a train. And I said to the person, I'm very interested to know why this was the mechanism of suicide you attempted. There are so many less painful ways. And, I just want to understand, because I think all forms of suicide, they're very revealing of the psychology of the person, right? Like I've had people say things to me like, I jumped into the ocean, and I'll say, boy, you must have really felt dirty. Lots of shame. Washing your hands wasn't enough. You needed the whole ocean, right? Remind me of Lady Macbeth, all the water of the seven seas, wash it, right? This whole idea. Or the person who takes an overdose of painkillers, and I say, you must be in so much pain that one painkiller wasn't enough. Or the person who takes rat poison, and you say, you feel like a pest? right? So you can interpret it. And so I wanted to know the symbolism of that. And the person said, this is fascinating and deeply disturbing, but he said he was sitting on the subway platform and he was watching all these people getting on the train or off the train who had like school bags, work satchels, their kids with them, their significant other, and he knew that they were going and and coming with goals and people who love them and whatever. And he got the idea, if I jump in front of that train, they can't get there either. The train will have to halt. They won't get to their loved ones. They won't get to school. They won't get to their kids. They won't. And they'll have to get out of the train and they'll have to look at me. And I'll be a somebody and they'll all have to not get what I don't have. And I understood in that moment the psychology of some of these people. The idea is nobody wants me. So why should you have life? Why should you belong? Why should you associate getting together with a bunch of people in a rally with safety and love and happiness? Why shouldn't it be associated with pain and loss and misery like it is for me?
So he's transferring.
Transferring. That's
They're
what category twos do. Right. So the idea is by making the gathering painful, then those
and
people
in this case,
experience
not
what they
only the
did.
gathering, potentially the country. I mean,
The country.
he
Yeah.
could have sparked craziness. I mean, let's be honest here, right? I mean, that shot had it been a centimeter one way or the other.
That's it.
I mean, this could be 1865. We don't know. I mean, just right now we're. I think.
But you get the point. Is that now a thing that was supposed to be, at least for the individuals who were interested in what was being said, that was a gathering that was associated with belonging, and now it's destroyed, right? And think of that and contrast it with the scene in that commercial of sitting at that table, being literally welcomed to the table, being selected for the commercial, looking up at that teacher figure, and you suddenly understand the two extremes that this person must have experienced. Do I belong or do I not?
So he's
and
kind of like living outside of himself, almost into a fantasy of violence.
yeah, well, who knows? I mean, I just think that there are some people in this world who get a little taste of acceptance and then a little taste of not, and it's not consistent, and they can't hold it together because they don't know what it is that makes people love them or not love them. What do I need to do to be accepted? So they hone in on one thing, and if they lose that thing, that's it. They're done because that's it. And and I think if you frame it that way, you can make sense out of this awful thing that happened. And obviously, this kid must have been missed on the radar, right? Because he was able to participate in a firearm club. So they couldn't have thought he was somebody that had been institutionalized or red flagged or something like that. That makes me think it isn't going to be category 4.
And yeah, but
or did he get booted because of that? We don't know yet.
Right. And to this question here, does it look like he's stockpiling? Do you think he's planning something prior to participating in the event? And that's obviously, that's possible for sure, that he wanted this to go further. But what was really interesting, I saw some responses on, TikTok and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Kids, and I mean literally, kids, teenagers, screaming and yelling, look, this was your one time to go down in infamy. Okay? And you missed. And I'm thinking to myself, holy cow, what is that? I need to know who that person is. We need to get somebody over to his house soon, because that's one of what we call leakage, as you know, Gary, for school shootings and stuff. Whenever you have people like that are throwing this stuff out there into the public and they're kind of, celebrating, the possible death of one and maybe two more and the near death of another. And all of a sudden, these people are out there celebrating. That we're on shaky ground there. And so that's the kind of attention you're talking about, I think, where he was anticipating, I'm going to attach my name.
That's right.
To this event. And really inside, like you even when you peg Koberger, you said when they find him, he's just going to be this blank slate, nothing there. And man, were you right on target?
Yeah, well, I wish I weren't, in a lot of ways. But that is, if he's guilty, let's see what happens in the case. But I think, Chris, that you have to understand that some of the people who voice that, it depends on what they believe and what they read and so forth about that. If somebody has been so demonized, then they think it's a good thing for the person to be eliminated, right? So it all depends on one's perspective. I think it's awful to even contemplate political violence towards even someone that you think is the worst person in the world. There's no place for that. Whatever it is a person believes, keep it to yourself, right? That's not what human beings are supposed to do. But what happens, unfortunately, is that in our political climate is a total demonization of each other. It isn't just you believe something I don't. It's like you believe something that represents like the Constitution being shredded, or we're all going to hell, or we're all going to live in a terrifying state, or whatever. And both sides kind of do it, and it's getting pretty outrageous. I mean, it does have that feeling like the country had before the American Civil War.
Well, and that's what Joanne is saying. She says, I look shocked at our country's rapid, downswing, but, maybe I've lived a little life and nothing shocks me. I mean, that's probably my problem. I mean, I've worked over 300 murders. And when you stand over 300 dead people, and those are just the murders, those aren't the naturals and the suicides and all the other stuff you get called out when you work homicide. You don't really get fired up over a bunch of stuff because I already know what to do in my head and in my life. Trust me, I'm beyond prepared for, if somebody opens up, one flew over the cuckoo's nest and everything goes, sideways. What I'm concerned with are the children in this country. And this young, 20-year-old, what drove him to this point? And that's where Dr. Gary is the expert in this. And, it'd be a good place to pick up. Let me pick up here what his friends continue to say
or
about.
People who knew him, that is to say, yeah.
Yes, yeah, or the knew him in the neighborhood, or friend of a friend who knew him.
He has an Instagram account, and there was things posted on it that were removed last night, claiming to be his mom, posting on it. I thought I had a screenshot of it, but I didn't. But it was like a whole post written out by his mom talking about, I had no idea my son was doing this, but for you guys to be like applauding my son's death and all this. But it was removed this morning. So I don't know what that was about. I don't know if it was a fake account.
Now, see, the young man is putting out into the environment that he had a Instagram account and that his mother allegedly said some things on it, you're applauding my son's death, etc. And then he comes in right behind it and says, well, I'm not sure if that's a fake account or not. And this is why words matter in our country. And what's fascinating about these devices and our inability to have a face-to-face, right? I mean, we can have a chat room, we can have text messaging and stuff. And I got a case right now where a young girl uses this device and she sends these videos, TikTok videos, over to another person who is, they're having a fight. They're having a fight. Okay? An argument. Fight's a poor choice of words. And she says, she picks a song, she finds a song, and then she lip syncs the song to her message that she wants to send to this other person. Mm-hmm. And so she, says, I hear you're, blah, 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 whatever it was, right? And then she sends it to the other person. The other person gets it, and she listens to it, and she does the exact same thing. So what they're doing is they're having an argument in their world.
Yeah.
Okay. And they're bullying each other left and right, left and right, left and right.
Interesting.
Okay. And they're not saying a word to each other. They're not talking to each other. They're not expressing their feelings to each other. They're lip syncing songs that have messaging into them. And you just wonder, holy cow.
Mm-hmm.
These, you see these kids sitting there and they're just, locked into this. And so I'm like, what in the world is going on here? And then you see stuff like this. To hear a 20-year-old laying on the side of a building or laying on the roof of a building, taking a shot at, a former president, to where this kid is now in the history books. He'll be in the Smithsonian, and
yeah, it's a big deal.
This is crazy. I mean, this is a world, that you just go, man, what in the, go ahead.
Well, no, finish your thought and then I'll.
And had he been successful, he would have spun the world. It would have spun the world. And nobody would have known because he was dead. Okay. Because they, and then they, all the other stuff would have started and just, it would have been this big fire that started in the world, not just in the country. And, that's some serious, dangerous ground, all from a kid who's sitting in the cafeteria by himself. And I mean, is that where we are?
Doesn't it remind you? I mean, you can imagine him almost seeing himself like a kind of David versus Goliath. The idea of like this little person that you didn't think had the strength to bring down this giant does it. And I think that's how he would have seen himself, that he was going to go down like that kind of figure. I have to tell you, what horrifies me, Chris, if you know your history, and I know you do, and I hope a lot of people in the audience do, is that the whole incident actually made me think a very great deal of John Brown. If you remember John Brown, who was quite deranged, actually, he, in 1859, in October of 1859, led a revolt where he was an abolitionist, and he led a revolt at Harper's Ferry in Virginia with the aim of arming African Americans to rise up against their masters and essentially have a race war. And 16 people wound up dead. 6 of them civilians, 9 other civilians were injured, if I remember. And it was absolutely brutal. He wound up getting hanged. John Wilkes Booth attended the hanging, by the way. A little bit of trivia. John Wilkes, the hanging of John Brown, was a very important event historically, because to one half of the country, it was the martyring of a hero who stood up for what they believed, who was brave enough to stand up for what they believed. And to the other part of the country, he was an evil man who murdered and slaughtered in the name of abolition, which, and so that's kind of what you've got going on here. You have half the country whispering, wow, this is somebody who really took into his hands something that a lot of people are fantasizing about, which is a depressing, awful thought. But you can bet there are people who have that disturbing thought. And then the other half says, oh my God, how could you even contemplate killing this person that I see as so good and so whatever? And I think that the problem with that kind of figure is that they sometimes antedate more horrible things that come later. John Brown was called the meteor of the war because he signaled the division that was going to occur in the entire country just shortly thereafter. And what I hope and pray is that this was not an incident that is going to turn out to have more historical importance. But unfortunately, historically, these things do tend to, because they divide us more. I'm hoping it goes the other way and makes us say there is no place for this disgusting violence in our rhetoric, and it needs to stop. It has to stop, Chris. But you understand, I think John Brown proves what one unwell person on a mission could cause.
Absolutely.
You remember the John Brown story, right?
I do. I sure do. And, you know, it's, you know, and you get, you know, thoughts like this, right? I mean, it's like they're waiting for a reaction.
I understand. But it's history. It's history.
Right.
That's what you're saying.
But yeah, but what the question here, right? Are you kidding? Okay, it's kind of like, you know, nobody would say this on the street if we were just having a conversation. Okay, if I said, you know what, this stuff potentially could end up in the Smithsonian. Okay, and by the way, that's the National Archives. Okay, that's where they hold stuff like this. Here's a hint. Okay,
you have to, Chris. The firearm that he used will be preserved.
Go to history. Okay,
right.
Number one, or it could be in the Henry Ford Museum, and you can also see the Lincoln chair there, and Lincoln's blood is still on it.
That's right.
In Detroit, Michigan. Actually, you know, it's in Dearborn. And also you can hear the call of prayer there too, if you're interested. Just a little, you know, trivia. But this is part of the problem, where kids like that don't have the emotional skill to handle people like this. Okay. And what I mean by that is, clearly, if there's this idea of you can just insult with no repercussion. And that's what the social media has allowed people to do. And this is why kids, or, you know, the shooter here, Thomas Crooks, one of the first things this person on the news, the way he identifies him as a victim of extensive bullying. That's how he identifies the shooter on national TV. Okay. And it's going to come out over time. It's going to come out over time that, you know, this kid, if that is the truth, there's this oppression, constant oppression. And that's what this tool has allowed people to do, to sit back as, you know, just avatars, okay, and just fire away, you know, at anybody they feel they want to fire away at. And what's scary about that is, you know, number one, okay, there's no life experience there. It's obvious. Okay? And number two, that women are going to be going to be the most victimized as we continue to move forward in this digital age, because it's the victimology. These tools are directed specifically, like in the virtual worlds, where men in these virtual chat rooms immediately attack women. Immediately. And if you're willing to do it in a chat, you're willing to do it anywhere. And that says a lot more about you than it does about the comment. Well, that's the category too that we're talking about tonight.
That's it. And Chris, listen, there are a lot of people in this audience. I mean, I've gone through it myself at certain points in life. I'm sure you have too, where you've had a time, whether it was at work or whether it was here in the true crime world, whether it was out with a friend. Everyone has experienced some kind of bullying where some person thinks that he or she is better than you in the pecking order and condescends to you and all that kind of thing. And I think that the point is that anyone who has experienced that for even a moment knows how powerful it is when another person comes along and says, I don't see anything wrong with you. I like you. I think you were right. I think you took a lot of nerve to stand up and say what you said. You know, I don't know why people don't give you more credit. I think people are stupid. It's not your fault. You're smarter than they are. You know, that kind of thing. Or actually, even though you're hard on yourself, I think you're kind of adorable. Or, oh, I think you're better looking than you think you are, or I don't care what your weight is, you know, that kind of thing. And when somebody loves you like that, it could save your life and save other people's lives. I am not kidding when I tell you, when I get up and give talks on mass shootings and things like that, people say, give us advice on how to prevent this stuff. I always get laughs when I say it. But I say, be kind. Stop being mean to people. It sets people off. And I have had people, Chris, I am telling you, there are events that would have been newspaper stories that people were fantasizing about doing, came and talked to me. I talked to them and was kind to them, and they didn't do it. And I have had people tell me that. Thank God you were nice to me that day. Thank God you picked up the phone. I needed you.
I have
And-
letters from guys in prison
Right.
that have committed murders, and they've written me saying thank you, you know, to your point, saying
That's right.
thank you so much for
That's
being
it.
kind to me, you know, and,
That's right.
and, you know, and when we hear this, and I'm going to finish this real fast if I can, Gary. And by
I
the
think
way,
it's very
if you're
interesting.
just joining us, we're talking about the personalities of assassins, and Dr. Brucato has broken it down into 4 categories, and we're talking about Thomas Crooks as category 2 tonight. And if you have
most likely.
yeah, and if you don't have his book and you've just joined with us, you need to pick up his book, The New Evil, on Amazon. It is an amazing read. Where would he fit? I think I asked that earlier, but
Well, if it turns out that he's a compensator for feelings of insecurity and bullying and so forth, particularly if he had some emotional difficulties, probably into category 13, which is where you put inadequate individuals that don't really quite know where they belong, identify with some kind of group or movement, lose it, and then go out.
Is he an incel? Would he fall into incel category?
Entirely possible. I mean, I don't want to say anything hurtful about him, but I mean, I think he was an odd-looking fellow. I mean, he gives a vibe of being a little odd, but you know, and it's possible that he wasn't particularly popular and all that. But I'm sure that he was a very, you know, sensitive soul. I don't think this was a jerk. I think this is somebody, if you had sat with him and talked, he would have had a lot of deep things to say. And I think he was probably profoundly lonely, knowing these kind of people. I mean, lonely. And I have to tell you that of all the feelings as a human being that I've ever had, I think if there were one that came closest to a kind of hell, it's the feeling of loneliness. In fact, I think that's what hell is. It's a complete separation from love. And I think if you've ever experienced it, it's horrible. It's horrible. And, you know, everyone's had a little taste of it in their life. The person they love passes away. The person that understood them the most leaves. You know, they can't get a date. The person that loved them cheated on them. They got nobody to eat lunch with in the cafeteria. Yeah, a lot of people in this audience have had that feeling. And you never forget it. I have people who come to therapy, Chris, that are in their 50s and 60s that talk about being bullied when they were 8, 7, 6. They don't let it go. It changes the whole course of a person's life. And the most important thing is to have an adult in the room who goes to the child and says, they don't like themselves. There's nothing to do with you. They don't like themselves. There are a lot of things about you that are only going to make sense a lot of years from now, you know. And you know, it's like the old joke about the kid who's getting picked on, and they call him Four Eyes and everything, and he turns around and he says, "One day, I hope you don't need me to operate on your prostate." Well, there's a little truth to that. You make fun of these kind of smart, oddball kids, but one day, that's the future. They're the ones who have to take care of the bullies one day in the future. And I've even heard stories about that, about having to be kind to the people who bully you. And I thought,
and you know my personality. You know, you know my personality. I was that guy that would walk over and say, "What are you doing? You know, knock it off, leave him alone."
thank
you know,
God.
and I mean, evident the fact that I just pulled a thing out of the air and put it up for everybody to see. You know, I could not, it drove me crazy. It
Good
drove
for
me
you.
crazy. Well, and I think it was because I grew up, as you know, this show isn't about me, but this idea of I had two parents who were Marines. They were very, right to the point. I lived in foreign countries. I lived in Japan. I lived in Hawaii. I was in my school in, Keola Hills. I lived in Kailua. You've seen my pictures of me in school. I was like the only white kid, and everybody else was, Asian or, Hawaiian or a different race. And there's this one little, guy, and I don't think it got ingrained in me. And when I was on the street, I always had, the victims' families, whether they're prostitutes, gang members, transgenders, I've worked them all. And we used to say, you cannot pick your victim. And it was such a gift internally, I felt, not to have this, prejudgment. I mean, I have judgment, of course, I'm a human being. Okay? But there's a time where it's like, you know what? That could be anybody. That could absolutely be anybody. And, you are a wealth of information. And Dr. Gary, I mean, your kindness and empathy towards the human condition obviously has driven you to the point where you not only write about these guys, study them, interview them, know them, but you see them on a daily basis as patients. And we all have a Gethsemane. I tell people, we all have a Gethsemane, and we don't know what that is. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, yes, I agree with you. I think, talk about somebody who was bullied.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
But I think one thing that I wanted to share, because I think it's very powerful, is that there is a brief poem by Edgar Allan Poe that I think very beautifully sums up what I think was going on with this kid, with this offender. If I may, I will read it, because it's not very long, if that's okay. And then we can talk about it quickly afterwards. But it goes like this. Let me see. I'll pull it up. I think I know it in my head, but I'm gonna just so I don't get it wrong. But it goes like this. It says, "From childhood's hour, I have not been as others were. I have not seen as others saw. I could not bring my passions from a common spring. From the same source, I have not taken my sorrow. I could not awaken my heart to joy at the same tone. And all I loved alone. Then, in my childhood, in the dawn of a most stormy life, was drawn from every depth of good and ill the mystery which binds me still. From the torrent or the fountain, from the red cliff of the mountain, from the sun that round me rolled in its autumn tint of gold, from the lightning in the sky as it passed me flying by, from the thunder and the storm, and the cloud that took the form, when the rest of heaven was blue, of a demon in my view." Now, what was Poe saying? He's saying that everybody else was able to enjoy life and feel connected and feel loved and feel wanted and see all these beautiful things that are supposed to make life gorgeous. And all I could see in them was darkness and loneliness and evil and pain and so forth. What does that tell you? It tells you that loneliness really is a kind of projection that comes from you. For example, I'm a pretty introverted dude, even though you may not tell because I play an extrovert on YouTube, on television. But I'm a pretty introverted dude. And I'll tell you that I don't feel lonely in that sense. I like being by myself, to be honest. I feel kind of contemplative. I easily could have been a monk. But the idea is that loneliness is about not liking your own company and projecting that onto the world, that it's the world's fault, right? And that's what Poe's doing there. And I think that's what you want to understand is, like, being alone is not supposed to be intolerable. If being alone is intolerable, that tells you something. about you, right? And that's, you got to get to a place where you have compassion for you. If the rest of the world doesn't love you, you have to love yourself. Love thy neighbor as thyself means you have to love you too. And I'll tell you, Chris, that's the hardest part for some people, even the holiest people. They think of themselves like a crumb.
Right.
And that is not what you can't do that. There are people in this audience that have totally fallen out of love with themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They need to rediscover that there is a unique thing that they contribute to the world, and not one of us is junk.
Yeah,
I mean,
no, God doesn't make junk.
Right. And look, not everybody participates in the same way in the narrative, but they're all essential. And that's the heart of this. I love that somebody said I couldn't be a monk because I couldn't take a vow of silence. That's probably true. That's a really good point. That's a really good point. I love that. That's hilarious. And those hooded habits, whatever, the sandals. But the thing is, but you have to laugh, Chris, that they said I couldn't take a vow of silence.
That's hysterical. I'm going to use it.
It's so true. But anyway, but Chris, I think what we're getting to is that the center of this story is rejection, bullying, loneliness, and then using grandiosity and violence as a way of leveling the playing field. And when we're asking about the root of this, we have to look in two places for the blame. The cesspool of political, aggressive, online
rhetoric,
crap and rhetoric that we're all swimming in all the time. And on the other hand, people who can't just stop for a minute and see goodness in a person, right? And those two things we have to remedy them. And I think that needs to be the take-home message of this conversation. This whole thing is awful, Chris, absolutely awful on so many levels. And it would have torn us in half.
I often, and how many times have you heard me mention, Gary, that I often wondered how the world got to a place where in Dachau, they took the neighborhoods.
Yeah.
When the military liberated the concentration camps, and they took the people from the neighborhoods and walked them around and made them do, the horrendous acts of moving those who were deceased and burying them. And yet there was this denial that it was even taking place. And I think, I'm going to finish the video here and show a couple of real quick.
I take a vow of silence, Chris.
No, you're good. You're good. I love you. You know that as a friend, and that I'm going to keep moving here.
But we saw that this morning too.
Did you just go to high school with him, or had you attended elementary or other schools or even local programs?
You see, I don't know if I was in elementary school with him, but I just know now that I was definitely in high school with him.
Same grade?
He graduated the year above me. I graduated in 21, he graduated in 22.
Had you ever seen him in homeroom? Someone said, you guys always would have, you'd sit in the cafeteria before class would start and he'd sit by himself. Did you ever see that?
I didn't see that. He did sit alone at lunch. He was always alone. I mean, he was bullied every day.
Did he walk with a certain cadence that was different maybe from how the other kids walked?
No, I wouldn't say that.
Someone said he walked on his tippy toes. I wasn't sure if you...
No, I wouldn't say that.
What's interesting about this and what you had mentioned earlier, and if you're just joining us, go back to the beginning when Dr. Brucato laid out his 4 categories. But what's interesting about this is this young man's definition or memory of this kid, even though he doesn't know him in totality, what he does know of him, i.e. somebody, the peer group, the class, the high school, what everybody knows of him is how he's described him. Look, this is the kid bullied every single day, and, you know, boom, 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 boom. And we're talking about this kid that we've never met, Thomas Crooks, today, because he's officially in the American history story as of yesterday.
You say we've never met him, Chris, but he's everywhere. We all know a kid just like him.
Amen. Yeah.
Like, you could look at him and you would be like, something's a little off. That's how I could describe it.
Was he really smart?
I won't be able to. I don't know that much.
You know, and this is a really great point from Kat. But who stepped in to help, right?
Yeah.
When help was needed. And I think that's the other point that you're making and that we're talking about tonight is these devices have not only separated us emotionally, physically, spiritually, mentally, you know, they've disconnected us, and where there's not a civil discourse anymore. I mean, when I was growing up, my dad used to say to me, my dad used to love to watch people. So we would sit on benches together. And I can remember him telling me as a kid, you know, hey, go over there and talk to that elderly gentleman over there and learn something. I'd be like, I'm not talking. Just do as I say and get over there and talk to that guy. And so it taught me to be kind of an extrovert if you can't figure that piece of the puzzle out. And I would go sit next to them, and at times I would actually say, hey, my dad told me to come over here and learn something. And, you know, next thing you know it, you're in a conversation about life. And I think that develops this gift of wisdom. And I don't think we don't do that anymore. We don't do that anymore. And it's really interesting because there's this barrier to entry into the human soul, and the universe almost feels like it's off schedule a little.
Well, you know, the paradox, Chris, is that the people I know who understand other people the most are the people that spend time away from them. You have to look at them to understand them, not be with them. You have to be over here. There's something about taking time alone that actually builds empathy for other people, because it's in that contemplation that people make sense. It's not when you're out there talking to them. You got to be over here a little bit. And unfortunately, everything about our entire culture, and here you'll see the Kierkegaardian in me, is designed to keep you out of yourself, to be noisy, bombastic. I mean, even religious ceremonies are so noisy and so full of costume that you don't even think about what you're doing anymore. You need some time alone. It's all designed to take you out of yourself, you know? And so that I think you can use alone time to actually heal and understand people where they're coming from a little better. And the truth is, Chris, so much of this is a kind of tribalism. It's just having a person who is in authority convincing you on a fear level, on like an amygdala level, that group is dangerous and bad, and this is the in-group you want to belong to. And if an authority figure wants to, they could convince you that the out-group is the group you want to be in, that the nerds are cool, you know, that kind of thing. Like, you know, and I think that's a very important thing for adults to do, to make kids understand that, like, why do you want to belong to that stupid group anyway? You know, it's like that kind of thing. If someone says to me, you're not included in the group, I'm like, oh, thank God. You know, I'm not as mediocre as that bunch. You know, and that's the first thought I have. Like, if I wrote a book and it wasn't a bestseller, I'd say, thank the Lord it doesn't have popular appeal, because it would insult me. You know, and that's the whole thing. I can't even imagine wanting to belong to the group. That's very odd to me. And so, because you get what I'm saying? Because I like myself. But if you don't like yourself, you mistake that for something that indicates that you're not lovable. But those are my favorite people. Those are my favorite people, Chris. Huh?
That's why the guitar's back there. I sit on my porch and just play guitar for
Why I
hours.
get along with you, Chris? This is some part of you resonates with some part of me, because I recognize it. And so, but these kids, Chris, I don't know. I guess, do you think that how do I say this? Do you think that they're looking at him thinking, should have been nice to him?
That's a great question. I think there's two things going on here. I think they're interjecting themselves into the world of media. Number one, I working with people during the day, as you know, during the week. There are many that just they're just lost, and this is an opportunity. And he goes on to say it. This young man says, hey, this is we never thought anything like this would happen here. And, oh, well, I kind of know that guy, but I don't really know him, but I know people that do know him. And it just kind of, this circle. So you just, and the kid behind him is, his, what do they call that? Where you've got your posse with you, the kid behind him, he's not saying a word, but this guy here is, getting into it. Let me finish this one thought.
Sorry, we jumped in late. What was your overall reaction when you realized you knew the kid?
Insane. Like something to come out of a town that like I've lived in all my years. It's so weird. It's honestly crazy.
The extent of your interaction with him was just kind of passing in the hallways.
Yeah, just seeing him.
Yeah, Julia, they could be processing. You're right.
The guy I was showing them, I had pictures on my phone of him and all this.
What more pictures that you have with him, or just...
Not of me, but like of my friend that he has pictures of him and stuff, like on the bus and in school.
Okay.
Forgive us for jumping in late, but were you in the same grade?
I was not. I graduated in 21 and he graduated in 22, so he was the year above me.
Thomas Crooks.
This is John Bradley.
That's bad.
I took the sound off. And what's interesting is the majority of the kids that came up to get their diploma, she uses their first name and says, congratulations. In this, she just hands him his diploma and doesn't say a word to him. Thank you. That's it. And walks away. So I put this in here just kind of as we get towards the end of this.
Yeah.
This is the counter assault team here. And one of the things I pointed it out yesterday, that this was what was going to be brought out today. But, I said it yesterday when I went live that these are the guys that did it. Now, there's two trains of thought here. They're wearing vests that say police, so they may not be part of the counter assault team in the Secret Service. They may be snipers from the local SWAT team. That's still to be determined. I've worked many details in my time way back when, where, we used to have a lot of political folks come out to Camp Pendleton. They'd land on Camp Pendleton, and then they would come out into town, into San Diego, and then they would, go through all their stuff. One of them I was involved in with Bob Dole, Jack Kemp, when they were all involved in the stuff. And
Bob Dole?
The Bob Dole, the senator.
Oh.
When he was on the ticket back in the day.
Yeah.
And I guarded Princess Anne in 1984 during the Olympics. The equestrian events were in Del Mar. And she was staying at a place called St. Milo. And at the time, I was in Vice and Narcotics and part of what was called SES, our Special Enforcement Section. And I had a chance to hang out with those guys. Where I'm going with this is I'm not convinced yet that the suspect didn't take a couple of shots at these guys. And here's why I'm saying this.
It's interesting.
You'll see the first shot, he kind of grabs his ears, but watch this officer, the SWAT team member, this sniper, I think he's going on his scope and he's looking downrange. And by the way, there's a lot of information coming out that one officer went up a ladder. He saw the suspect pointed his rifle at him. If that's true and he didn't engage him, that's going to be another story in of itself. Okay. But we'll wait to see how that information is going to flow, but it's coming out. Okay. But what's interesting, I wanted to focus on these two guys yesterday. I want to focus on them again today, is I want you to watch where he kind of jerks back and you'll see the tripod and everything move. Okay. And then you'll hear the first round. And I think that's what bought the suspect time to get rounds off. And either he gets a round off towards the former president and then shifts, boom, 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 starts shooting towards these counter sniper guys. And that's when the guy on the floor there, he's laying down. I think that's the guy that did the kill shot. And so everybody real carefully watch them move as if they were getting shot at, and you'll hear the rounds.
If you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
Right there. Do you see him moving? See him pull the
Yeah, that's
the
very
tripod?
interesting, Chris. I hadn't thought of that.
And you hear the rounds go, and you'll see the second guy, you'll see his foot move. So he's starting to slide back. So I think we'll find out that the suspect tried to engage the counter sniper team as well as try to shoot simultaneously. Hear all the rounds going off, the extra round? Watch it again.
If you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
See how he ducks? He does one of these, and you got to pay real close attention to it. Whoops. Where the heck did it go? Sorry about that, everybody. You got to pay real close attention.
If you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
Right there. See, he goes down, he goes up, and then he goes down again. And he pulls the rifle back. And that's when I think he engaged him. But you hear those extra rounds. Pop, 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 pop.
Chris, does it sound to you like an AR-15?
Yeah, especially at that distance. It's probably a 223 or, round going off. And, it's probably an M4 or something like that. It's, I'll tell you what, when the problem with those rounds is they go so fast, they tumble. Okay. So when it strikes something, what I don't think people realize is when they hit you, okay, they're tumbling. So it's like a meat grinder. Okay. I had a case one time where a guy took an SKS, which is an assault rifle. Believe it or not, they had smuggled it in from the first Gulf War in a Humvee. It was a Marine that smuggled it in the wheel well of the Humvee, got back to the United States, and he sold it out on the street. Long story short, it went into the hands of gang members. There was a quinceañera, it was a party, and this guy pulled the weapon out and just started mowing people down. And I had 5 victims. And long story short, the rounds, they tumble. And that's that people, describe going by. That's because it's not this. Okay, now you can get rounds that will do that, but 9 out of 10 times is when it's going, it starts to move and it starts to do this. Okay, and that's when it hits something, it, just really tears it up. Watch these two guys.
If you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
And all that is the finger. We're watching.
If you want to
You
really
can really
see
see it.
something that said, take a look at what happened.
See? He looks up, then he goes down. And I think the suspect tried to engage him. But we'll find out as we go along here.
Really
any-
interesting.
any
I hadn't
thought-
thought of anything like that. That's really intriguing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a defective detective in me, Gary. Yeah. How many times have we been on meetings and, I've seen things and people go, what? And then all of a sudden, whoops, it starts to sometimes makes a connection. But I think it's been a good program tonight. I think everybody has been really civil.
Yeah.
We have a hero with Corey and his family for shielding his wife and his daughters from the bullets that were flying. We're praying for Mr. Dutch, who's the Commandant in the Marine Corps League of Pennsylvania. We're with your family. James Copenhaver, 74, who's in stable condition. And we're also praying for our country, for both candidates.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, I think this event puts everybody at risk. Not only, former President Trump, but everybody. And from Congress down, from the presidency down to even a local level. It's just, when these kind of things happen, it just, sometimes loosens up those that have been on the edge all along. And it just pushes them, to the edge. And Dr. Brucato and myself and every other American, I think, in this chat never wants to see anybody ever, have to deal with that kind of situation out there.
Exactly.
Thank you, Kat, so very much.
Yeah.
So you get the last word, Doc. Thoughts?
Oh, well, I think what wound up happening tonight was that we illustrated the power of words, the power that words have to heal or destroy, and the way that words can help people understand a terrible tragedy like we did tonight and bring people together. Words are the commodity that is used by human beings to connect and divide. And the tongue is perhaps one of the most powerful weapons in the world. And you could hurt somebody with your words sometimes worse than you could hurt them with bullets. That you could hurt them for life. I mean that metaphorically, of course, but there is truth to it. And I think what I hope that this conversation does is it makes people realize that they have to tamp down the rhetoric and that their words are valuable and mean something and can do a lot of harm if used the wrong way, or do a lot of good if used the right way. And I think listening to what the boys said about this deceased assailant, you really got the sense that they were talking about him kind of the way that you or I might talk about a certain lake or ocean, where we're talking about, the color of it and what it looks like on the surface, and maybe that there's like an occasional boat or fishing or something. But if you could dunk your head under the water, you would see that the body of water might be filled with things like whales or sunken ships and fish and all kinds of mollusks and mountains of sand and coral or whatever, meaning that we don't know what was going on inside this kid, but there was a whole world in there. And, you got to remember when you're judging people that you're not dunking your head under the water and seeing the whole thing that's inside of them. And I think that what he took to the grave with him would make some sense out of this, but all we've got are little shadows of what happened. And I think we came close probably to the truth in our speculation with what went on here. And if people are interested in this type of personality, I really, really recommend this book by James Clark, which is called, I'll show it to you if you can get a copy. It's called American Assassins, The Darker Side of Politics. It's the classic on the personality types of assassins. Or you can read in The New Evil about the different categories of people who commit violent offenses, and maybe you'll start to understand a little better. And in the meantime, if Chris and I have touched you in some way emotionally with our conversation, if you were kind of feeling moved or like you had something you wanted to say about your own life or someone you know, or that you've helped, or something you really wish you could tell the world, you don't have to feel alone. You could reach out. We always love hearing stories about how the work we do touches hearts. And it means a lot to us because it outweighs a lot of the crap we hear about the people who don't fully grasp what we do or say or mean or stand for. And wouldn't you say, Chris, it means a lot to us to hear from people who love the show and are helped by us. And what do you think?
And I do. I look at all the comments. Unfortunately, sometimes they just get so crazy and people get so mean with each other. I just turn them off. I mean, and I'm not, and then everybody says, how dare you, stop free speech. Look, one of our rules is just try to be kind. And I mean, it's okay to say what you need to say, but it just opens up all kinds of craziness. And so to Dr. Brucato's point, we love reading your comments. Gary chimes in. I can't tell you how many times I've even told him, I said, and thank you so much. Thank you so much.
But it's nice to hear, Chris, that people are touched by the work of the show, and to hear people say, wow, I really needed to hear that more than you realize, or I was feeling really angry and scared, and now something makes sense, or I had an opportunity to do that and it didn't seem that important to me, and now it does feel important. And I think in that sense, even this show, with the words that come out of this show, can change lives. And that's the whole thing. And that's why I love being here. I think you do change lives, and I'm very proud of you for that. So in the meantime, be well.
Let's go to Hawaii.
Hard working every day, I'm stressed out 24/7, babe. No timeouts, wish we could fly away. You and I go to our favorite place. Oh yeah, make special memories together. I'll be your company now and forever. I say we fly away. You and me go to our favorite place. Feeling the sun on my face in Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. I need a summer breeze, some fresh air to put my mind at ease. No cares. You wanna come with me? Me and you go to our favorite tree. Are you ready now? We jump on a plane now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. Don't hesitate now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. We'll never come down. We're going away. Yeah, we're going away. You and me. Feeling the sun on my face in a while.